Jessie had always heard the stories. Stories about the woods outside her little town. Everyone called them Black Hollow. Parents told their kids never to go there after dark. They whispered that witches lived among the twisted trees, waiting, watching, ready for anyone foolish enough to wander too far in. Jessie thought it was nonsense. Just an old ghost tale meant to scare children into behaving. She didn't believe in witches. Not until the night she decided to prove everyone wrong. Jessie was stubborn, curious, and maybe a little reckless. One autumn night, with the moon bright overhead, she grabbed a flashlight. No phone, no friends, no plan. She told herself she'd walk deep into the woods and come back with proof there was nothing to fear. Nothing at all. The deeper she went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no crickets, not even the wind. Even her footsteps on the dead leaves sounded muffled, like the forest itself was swallowing the sound. Jessie told herself it was fine, but her stomach tightened. Her throat felt dry. The silence was wrong, too heavy, too expectant, like the trees were holding their breath. After half an hour, something changed. Her flashlight flickered, just once. When it came back on, the forest looked different. The trees weren't the same ones she had passed earlier. Their bark was cracked and black like old charcoal. Their branches leaned in toward her, like they were listening. Jessie froze. She forced a laugh. Okay, creepy. That's all. But her laugh died quickly in the silence. Then she smelled something. Smoke. Not cigarette smoke, not a campfire. Something different, sharp, sweet, and bitter all at once. It was herbs, burning. Jessie's chest tightened. Maybe there were campers ahead, or teenagers playing tricks. She followed the smell anyway, step by step, her shoes crunching softly in the leaves. The smell grew stronger, so did the silence. Then she saw it, a faint glow through the mist, orange, red, and a strange green that did not look like any fire she knew. Jessie crept closer, her knees shaking. She crouched behind a fallen log and saw the clearing. At its center was a huge stone circle, cracked and blackened by fire. A pale ring of flames flickered around it without wood or fuel. Shapes moved within the glow, cloaks, hoods, and when the flames flared higher, faces. They were pale, too pale, thin as bone. Their eyes glowed faint red like embers behind ash, and their mouths whispered together, chanting in a language Jessie didn't understand. Her breath caught in her chest. She pressed herself low against the log. Her flashlight shook in her hand. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. That's when she saw it. In the middle of the circle, lying on the flat stone, was a deer, cut open, its blood smeared across the cracks of the rock. Jessie covered her mouth to keep from gasping. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, louder than the chanting, louder than anything. The witches moved in tighter. Their words grew louder, and the air grew cold, biting, unnatural. Jessie knew she had to leave. She turned to run, but the forest behind her had changed again. The trees bent together, branches clawing across the trail, sealing it like a cage. Her flashlight flickered, then died. The chanting stopped, and in the silence, a single voice slid across the clearing. "We smell you, child." Jessie froze. Her skin turned cold. Every witch in the circle turned their head toward her. Jessie tried to steady her breathing. The log pressed into her chest as she lay flat against it, her flashlight trembling in her hand. She could still see them, the pale faces circling the fire, their glowing red eyes reflected in the flames like embers. Jessie's stomach churned. The chanting rose and fell, a rhythm that made the hairs on her neck stand up. She had to leave. She had to get out. Slowly, she turned, pushing herself backward through the damp leaves. But the forest was not the same. The path she had taken was gone. The trees had bent closer, their branches interlocking like the bars of a cage. Every direction was blocked, twisted into walls of wood and shadow. Jessie's breath caught. She lifted the flashlight and flicked it on again. The beam shined against the bark of a nearby tree, cracked, warped, split like burned skin. Her hands shook. She stepped back. Then the firelight behind her dimmed. The chanting stopped, and in the silence, one voice cut through the night. "We smell you, child." Jessie's heart froze. The witches all turned their heads at once, their glowing eyes locking onto the shadows where she hid. Her body moved before her mind did. She bolted. Roots caught her ankles. Branches clawed her arms, her face. She stumbled forward, gasping for air. The forest twisted around her. Paths she didn't take appeared in front of her. She ran left, then right, then straight ahead. But no matter which way she ran, she ended up in the same place. The clearing, the fire, the witches. Every time she thought she'd escaped, she returned to them. And every time, they stood closer. Their voices followed her through the trees. First whispers, then chants, and then her name. Jessie, Jessie, Jessie. Her chest burned, her lungs screamed for air, her legs ached with every step. But she couldn't stop. She broke through the brush and stumbled into another clearing. This one was different. A single crooked tree stood at its center, and hanging from its branches were dozens of dolls, stick figures bound with string, decorated with scraps of bone. They swayed gently, though there was no wind. Jessie's flashlight beam shook as she raised it toward them. One doll twitched, then its head turned, slowly, unnaturally, its jaw unhinged, and it screamed without sound. Jessie staggered back. Her foot caught a root. She nearly fell. She spun and froze. The witches were behind her, glowing eyes, pale faces, fingers long and sharp as thorns stretching toward her. Jessie screamed. She ran. But this time the ground beneath her cracked. The earth gave way. She plunged into darkness, crashing into a pit tangled with roots and bones. Her flashlight clattered across the dirt. Roots curled around her wrists, around her ankles. Cold, tight, alive. She screamed again, clawing at the dirt, but the roots pulled her deeper. And above, the witches leaned over the edge of the pit. Their glowing eyes stared down, their mouths curling into terrible smiles. Another offering. Their voices echoed inside her skull. Jessie's cries faded into the dark, until nothing remained but the chanting. Jessie's body ached. Her hands scraped against the dirt walls of the pit as she struggled to breathe. The air was thick, damp, cold. The smell of rot filled her nose. Old bones, wet roots, and something sour, something dead. She lifted her head. The flashlight flickered weakly nearby, half buried in mud. She crawled toward it, her arms trembling. When the beam came on, it shook in her hand, painting shaky light across the pit walls. Roots twisted around her legs, snaking through the earth like veins. They pulsed. Jessie froze. They were moving. She tried to pull free, clawing at the roots, but they tightened. The more she struggled, the deeper they dug into her skin. Her breath turned into short, panicked gasps. "Let me go," she whispered. But the forest did not listen. Above her, the witches still stood, their faces pale and cold under the moonlight. Jessie could hear them whispering again, but their words didn't sound human anymore. They hissed, croaked, and clicked, like insects speaking a language too old for people to understand. The firelight flickered around the rim of the pit, dancing across their cloaks. Jessie tried to look away, but something made her stop. Behind them in the clearing, the slab was still there, the flat stone where the deer had been laid. Except now, it wasn't empty. Something lay across it, something that looked human. Jessie's stomach turned as she realized what it was. A body, small, thin, still. She couldn't see the face, but she didn't need to. Her flashlight slipped from her fingers and rolled into the dirt. The beam stopped on the roots at her feet, and she saw something pale tangled in them. A hand. Jessie screamed. The witches didn't move. They only smiled, wide and cracked, their glowing eyes locked on her. One of them lifted her arms and began to speak, her voice sharp and scraping. The roots jerked. Jessie's body was pulled down another inch. She clawed at the walls, dirt filling her nails, her breath ragged. "No, no, please!" But her words broke into sobs. The roots moved again, crawling higher, wrapping around her waist, her chest. Her flashlight flickered one last time before dying completely. Now, the only light came from the circle above, the witches, the moon, and the faint glow of embers burning on the stone. Jessie's body trembled. She reached up toward the light, dirt falling from her fingertips. Her nails scraped the wall, leaving long streaks of mud. "Help me," she whispered, but her voice didn't echo. It was swallowed. The forest took it, like it always did. One of the witches leaned closer to the pit's edge. Her face was hollow, her mouth too wide for her body. When she smiled, it stretched across her cheeks like cracked glass. Her voice was soft, too soft. "Sleep, little wanderer." The roots pulled tight. Jessie's scream rose through the trees, and then it stopped. The witches' voices filled the silence, chanting again. Slow, steady, endless. And then, nothing. The pit was still. The fire burned lower. And above the circle of trees, the moon began to fade. The forest was quiet. So quiet, it almost felt like it had never made a sound at all. The first light of dawn crept slowly between the trees. It spilled across the forest floor, soft and pale. The air was cold, still, heavy. A few birds began to sing, their chirps sharp and thin in the silence. The wind returned, brushing through the leaves like a sigh. The woods looked normal again. The pit was gone. No roots, no bones, no sign of struggle. Only a patch of disturbed soil and the faintest impression of a handprint pressed deep into the earth. A little farther through the trees, the clearing waited, still and gray in the morning mist. The fire was out. Smoke curled weakly from the circle, rising like ghosts into the pale sky. At the center of it all lay the flat stone, cold, dark, and stained. The marks on it were faint now. Old blood dried into thin veins that trailed across the surface. And there, scratched into the stone, were names. They weren't neat. They weren't carved carefully. They were jagged, crooked, written by shaking hands or something that didn't understand letters. Some of the names were so old the stone had started to swallow them. Others looked fresh. And at the edge, newest of all, one name stood clear. Jessie. The wind stirred the trees again. The forest exhaled. A crow landed on the stone. It tilted its head, beak clicking, eyes black and empty. Then it flew off, disappearing into the mist. The forest went still again. And then, if you listened closely, beneath the rustle of the leaves, you could hear it. A faint whisper, almost too quiet to notice. Another offering, and then silence. Just the trees, the morning light, and the stone, waiting.